April 4th, 2002. Dear whoever you are. She knocked on my bedroom door like she actually expected me to be asleep. A soft rap with her knuckles that I wouldn't have heard if I was. The light from the hallway spilled into the room as she opened the door wider. I mumbled against the pillow and reached for the lamp on the nightstand. Bilbo groaned and yawned and jumped down from his place at the end of the bed, running downstairs to curl up on the couch or Dad's armchair or wherever he would least likely be disturbed. My mom stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Did you fall asleep okay? I nodded and scooted over for her to sit on the bed beside me. Falling asleep wasn't the problem. It never was anymore. But it was like my sleep cycles were all messed up because as soon as the numbers on the clock hit 3, I was awake like I'd never even been asleep at all. She needs to stop sleeping during the day, Dr. Denlinger had said during our visit today. That's why she's waking up at night. Which would seem to make sense, so I can't really blame him for that logic. Except I kept telling him I'm so tired, so why can't he do something about that? We were armed with a list of symptoms and possible diagnoses written on a piece of notebook paper the last time we saw him. When he walked into the room and I showed it to him, he glanced over it briefly before asking me where it came from. I could tell it took all of his restraint not to roll his eyes when he handed the list back to me. You can't diagnose yourself based on what you read on the internet, he said. Why not? You don't seem to be doing such a bang-up job. The words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them, but between you and me, I didn't really care. My mom sighed and raised her eyes to the ceiling, but didn't admonish me. My dad hid a smile behind his hand. Dr. Denlinger was pissed. He ripped the sheet of paper out of my hands and went down the list one by one. No lesions on the brain, so you don't have MS. Lyme disease is rare and you tested negative. Your thyroid test came back in the normal range. You're too young to have arthritis. Well, what about the chronic fatigue one? My mom asked. I don't believe in chronic fatigue syndrome, he said. There's not enough evidence to support it. My professional opinion, he emphasized those last words and stared at each of us before continuing, is that Amelia is clinically depressed and the majority of her symptoms are psychosomatic. Psychosomatic. I'd learned that word from him too. But he wasn't the only one to throw that diagnosis around. Dr. Pierce had all but inferred that my perceived illness, her words, not mine, started and ended with my mind during the first and only appointment I'd ever had with her. I talked to my parents after my session, wondering if that's what they thought too. Was I really going crazy? Because more and more it was starting to feel like it. More and more I was starting to believe it. My dad sat me down after we got back from Dr. Pierce's office and shook his head angrily, lamenting that people have misplaced compassion. You'll never see someone questioning an animal suffering, he said. Then he folded his hands over my own and looked me in the eye and opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but he leaned forward and kissed my forehead instead. So when Dr. Denlinger suggested I was making everything up, my dad stepped in, again. Still, the insinuation hurt, and I didn't know what to believe. Do you think I'm going crazy? I asked my mom as she made herself comfortable on the beds beside me. Because I don't know anymore. I can't tell yes from no, down from up, right from left. Everything seems so backwards. I'm 17. The only thing I have is right now and a future to dream about, and even that is being taken away from me. I'm not graduating with my friends next year. I'm not even going to have a senior year. I may not even make it past this summer. Do you know what that's like? To be a teenager and have dreams and goals and people you want to meet and things you want to see and wonder if you'll even survive the summer. Not in like a metaphorical way, but really, truly, literally. I believe you, my mom whispered. She leaned her head against mine and ran her fingers through my hair in long, comforting strokes. We're going to figure this out. If we have to go to 1,000 doctors, we'll figure this out. I could hear the pain in her voice, layered with an uncertainty and helplessness that must be magnified by 1,000 against what I felt for Izzy when she broke her wrist, or Sam when he dropped out of school, or Bilbo when he was sick and had to spend the night at my dad's vet clinic. And I imagined him lonely and scared and wondering why he couldn't be home with us, why we weren't there with him. Because if that's how I felt for my sister and my brother and my dog, I could only imagine how unbearable it must be for my mom to watch her daughter disappear and become a shell of her former self right in front of her eyes. The thought killed me. It killed me. Because I love her too much. I don't want them to be hurt by this. I don't want them to see me like this any more than I want to be like this. I don't want them to be scared and feel helpless and wonder what more can they do. I don't want them to think I'm not trying to survive this because they're the only thing that's making me not want to give up and give in. They're the only ones keeping me from jumping. I want them to know that when my mom asks me to eat the Sunday breakfast she's cooked, even though I have no appetite and no energy, I swallow a few forkfuls of scrambled eggs for her. And when Dad wants to watch a movie because that's our thing now and it's all I can do, I don't tell him that the light hurts my eyes because I want to have this moment with him. And when Izzy has an art exhibit at school, I hold her hand as we take small steps down the hallways because I'm her big sister and I need to be there for her. And when Sammy comes over and watches me struggle to scrawl a few words down in a letter, I let him help me because he's my big brother and he needs to feel like he's there for me. I want Dr. Denlinger to know that. I want him to see me and my mom in my room tonight, me holding my mom's hand and telling her I love her while she rests her cheek against my head and tells me to keep fighting. I want him to see the pain this is causing and realize I wouldn't choose this. I wouldn't choose this. I'd never choose this. I want him to understand that while he's busy thinking I'm just some messed up teenager praying for attention, I have that attention and I don't want it. I don't want my parents to be scared and hurting. And I don't want them to watch me turn into a ghost because that's what I'm becoming. That's what happens when you survive but you're not alive. That's what happens when your heart keeps beating and you're barely breathing. I'm not asking for much. I'm just asking for someone to hear me and believe me and help me save my own life. I feel like I'm drowning, Mom, I said. Like I'm submerged underwater and I'm not going to make it. Not like she did. Not like the real Amelia Garrett. I could feel her breath hitch, and a moment later the pin drops of pressure as tears fell to my hair. Be brave a little while longer for me, she said. All I am anymore is afraid. Not strong, not optimistic, and definitely not brave. I don't know how, I whispered. My mom was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice sounded soft and far away, like she was lost in a memory, repeating words spoken before I was even born. Sometimes it's the battles no one else can see that you have to fight hardest. She pressed her lips against my forehead. Oh, sweetheart, she said. There's more than one way to be brave. I played with the cords on my pajama pants, rolled them between my fingers, and watched them unravel again as she spoke. I remembered what she said to Sammy once, when he called his namesake a coward because he'd fled Philadelphia at the first sign of the outbreak of yellow fever. Sam didn't understand how running away from tragedy could be considered anything but wrong, but my mom had said that sometimes there's more to surviving than just being alive. Samuel Breck had recorded his story for us to read and learn from, she'd said. We'd never know the horrors of those events without him. I was too young for it to make sense to me then, but I was starting to understand it now. Some people survived and moved on with their lives, never looking back. Some people were transformed by what they'd endured and carried that with them forever. And some people were survivors by association, like my mom and her soldier, or Samuel Breck and his neighbors, or everyone who died last September, and all of us who were left behind to grieve. I didn't want to ask her what kind of survivor she thought I'd be. I didn't want to hear her answer, because for the first time in my life I felt connected to my namesake. If Amelia Garrett could survive a sinking ship against all odds, then maybe I could too.